Content warning. This podcast contains bones, blood, smut, and swear words.
Dear listener, so many apologies. My audio quality is horrible this week, and I'm the host. In addition to sounding like I'm speaking through a tin can, you can occasionally hear what I can only hope for past Marie is my children baking in the kitchen. I think that next episode I start hiding in the closet to improve my audio quality. I don't know if it actually improves it. I guess we'll find out.
Before we get into the good shit this week, we wanted to remind you that we've launched a Patreon. So by the time this episode launches, patrons of all levels will have gotten 2 hilarious bonus games, and patrons at the Iliac Crest level, because hips don't lie, they will have heard our Waterworld review and will be waiting ever so patiently for John to mansplain gamer memes to the rest of us in a few weeks. Not because he's a mansplainer, just because he happens to be male, and we are also noobs, and we asked him to explain it to us. So if you want access to our murder boards, outlines, and an ever-growing backlog of bonus episodes, head over to patreon.com/frontlinefifth or follow the link in the show notes. Okay, now back to that sweet, sweet Bone Zone action.
Act 1. Welcome, penitents. Hello and welcome to the Frontline Fifth, a Locked Tomb podcast where brand spanking new novitiates, they're a little jaded by now, explore the Locked Tomb series for the first time while a couple of dried-out Brone witches cackle over how little they really know. We just finished reading Gideon the Ninth by Tamsin Muir, and this week we are letting our Cavalier's ghosts take our sword hands as we carve our way through the final words of Book 1 of the Locked Tomb series. My name is Marie, and before we do anything else this week, I want to take a minute to thank you, dear listener. The week before we recorded this episode, we hit 4,000 downloads.
And I had an aneurysm.
More than 400 of you have found and listened to our opening episode. We finished the whole book, and we are in awe. We started this podcast as a labor of love. I obsessively reread these books, and I just wanted to really vicariously relive what it felt like to explore the Locked Tomb for the first time, and I think that we are all just really proud of what this has become. I have to express my incredible deep gratitude to my co-hosts, because over this season, you listeners have heard that people who know me well, Hannah, Brooke, John, my students, my husband, all describe me as unhinged, but in a good way, apparently, or chaotic, but in a fun way, and kind of crazy, but in a loving way. And really what they're all trying to say is that I probably have undiagnosed ADHD, which is to say, this podcast would not exist without Hannah, Brooke, and John, because I have ideas, but they have ideas and get shit done.
Mostly Hannah.
Thank you all from Supremely the bottom Hannah. Of my heart for making my dreams come true. And before we get into the episode this week, is there anything that any of you want to say to our listeners?
Yes. Every week, I look at the community on Podbean and the reception and the numbers, and I get so excited. And of course, I run and tell my wife. A couple of weeks ago, one of our friends told us they ran into a complete stranger at a convention on the East Coast here, and they found somebody who was listening to our podcast that has no connection to us. My wife is always so incredibly happy that this is being well received and that I have a creative project to channel my energies into. But the last few weeks, as I tell her, the numbers have been different. She is still very happy, but I'm beginning to see a small glimmer in her eyes that looks like existential dread. I see the gears turning in her massive brain as the numbers keep going up. She is coming to terms with the fact that this might actually take off and her worst nightmare might come true. That it will become just big enough to be annoying. I currently have to spend a tremendous amount of salary coming up with active ways to annoy my wife. It is my love language. But we are getting close to the end game, where my very existence is a passive inconvenience to her. So I once said that I didn't want you to lie in our reviews and to give us 3 or 4 stars if you felt we deserved it. I said a few episodes ago that I'm fully on board and I want you to lie and give us 5 stars. I mean it. Give us more reviews. Send proof to us via DMs that you sent this podcast to a friend, and I will send you our Waterworld episode for free. Or if you're interested in feet pics, I will send you feet pics.
I think that we can manage something like stickers even.
Yes, more stickers than feet pics. Either way, we're going to the moon, which, now that I come to think of it, has been suspiciously absent from Gideon the Ninth thus far.
Brooke, do you want to follow that up?
I am the opposite of John. I am not obsessively watching the numbers because if there's anything that terrifies me, it is the idea of people I don't know judging me. Like, I was vaguely terrified. I know, I was vaguely terrified of doing this podcast, and I had the small solace of, well, you know, it's so niche, and probably only our friends are ever going to end up listening to this. And so I'm vaguely terrified. Please lie or say nothing. Do not enjoy it.
Brooke is like, please love me.
I
just want to say sex pal. No, that's a lie. That's not what I want to say. I really, really want to say this has been a bad year. It's been a bad couple years, and I'm not super happy, and I'm so happy when I'm doing this. So enormous thank you to the listeners, because you are actually making this like possible, and you're giving me an excuse to do this all the time. Huge thank you to my friends and family who are putting up with me talking about it literally nonstop, and an enormous thank you to Marie and to Brooke and to John, because I feel like we've grown so close actually as friends doing this. So like I just feel like I have this tight little weird necro family, and on top of that, it is just like such a joy to get to do this project with you. So before I cry, I'm going to hand it back over to Marie.
Cool. We've got a meme watch. But they're all kind of literary and a little bit obscure.
I think we should commit to the idea that all illusions are memes. That
yes.
Like a Bible illusion, meme. Shakespeare illusion, it's a meme.
Great, because we have both of those this week. I would also like to point out that because I've been rereading, and again, this isn't spoilers. This is just, I feel like it's a fair non-spoiler review of the series, is that you get this kind of weird mishmash of spoilers and not spoilers. You get this weird kind of mishmash of like memes and literary allusions that are treated like equally in the writing by Tamsin in Gideon. And then
she holds Shakespeare and the Bible to the same level of reverence as quotes from Mean Girl.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Precisely.
Beautiful.
Exactly. And if you read interviews from her, like that is how she describes her brain working when she writes as well. So it's like, yeah, this is accurate. It really just goes off the rails in Harrow. Let me tell you. Like the level of memes is like Gideon, and then so much in Harrow, and then I think her editor was like, what the fuck, Tamsin? And there are really not that many in Nona.
That must mean you need to tone it down.
Can you imagine the first copy edit of Nona?
And I just think it's really funny because they get really unhinged in Harrow, and I think her editor like didn't realize some things that were memes, and then when the editor saw how many memes got through, they were like, no. And they did more homework on Nona.
Amazing.
So just with that, let's go to our illusion/meme watch for this week. So there's a couple of minor ones. So probably the one that is the least able to be called a meme, but it kind of might be an illusion, is what's done is done is done. So in Macbeth, Lady Macbeth says what's done is done. But I think it's also just kind of something that we end up just kind of saying. I don't know if it was popularized by Shakespeare, or if it's just an English language thing, but that one's a possible.
Strong catch, though. Nice.
The You Can't Go Home Again is popularized because that is a novel by Thomas Wolfe. It was published posthumously, but what the novel is about is a dude who writes a successful novel about his hometown, and then everybody in his hometown gets pissed off at him at the way that he wrote about his hometown, and so basically you can't go home again, right? Like you can't go back.
It's also the opening phrase of the World of Warcraft Classic announcement trailer.
Oh.
Yes.
Oh my god, that's absolutely what it is.
What do you mean?
So remember when I said the you think you do but you don't meme? All right, you can cut this.
No, this is perfect.
So you think you do but you don't. Anyway, cut 5 years later when they announced World of Warcraft Classic, the original version of World of Warcraft that the guy said, you think you do, but you don't. It opens with a in-universe character who is a tiny gnome, but is actually a time dragon. Her name is Chromie.
I'm sorry, that was so many words in a row that made no sense.
That's what happens anytime you're talking about World of Warcraft.
I caught it.
She's a giant gold dragon, but when she's in her humanoid form, she is a gnome. And they use her to basically try to keep all the timelines straight because now there's so much content and expansions that like nothing makes sense, right? Because it's all existing in the same world. So like they use her to try. Anyway, so the whole thing starts off with someone once said, "You can't go home again," but that person lacked vision. And then like a chrono discombobulator, and she like smacks a button and it like rewinds through all the trailers of every World of Warcraft expansion until it goes right back to vanilla. And then it like plays the original vanilla trailer again.
That's well done. That's a deep cut too.
Yeah, I feel like that might be like both of those things are what's like both of those are equal and spinning in Tamsin's head when she says you can't go home again.
And that means that the guy who came out and said you don't want this, like, he's the one that lacks vision. They're making fun of him, right?
Yes.
That's right.
They made him announce the game, so I think he realized that he, had to eat crow a little bit. So
Publicly, a lot maybe.
he was a good sport about it at the end.
Also, listeners, if you're lost about all of this about World of Warcraft, you might want to become a patron and listen to John tell us more about it. Shameless plug. That's what we're doing this episode, right?
Yes.
Don't turn us off. Don't turn us off.
We're getting there. We're getting there. Last meme, and this one, it kills me. So if you think that this sounds kind of like out of place or whatever, like this is deep cut from the Bible, is the land that shall receive thee dying, in the same will I die, and there will I be buried. The Lord do so and so to me, and add more also, if aught but death part me and thee. So that's what Gideon's soul or hallucination, or however we're going to talk about it, tells Harrow right before kind of like the end of that chapter. That is from the Book of Ruth. And in the Book of Ruth, it's basically Naomi leaves Judah, like the land of Judah, to go to where the Moabites are with her husband. She has 2 sons. Her 2 sons get married, and then her husband and her 2 sons die. And so it's these 3 widows who are left, which, you know, of course, in biblical time, being a widow isn't great. You always have to have a man to take care of you because, you know, you're worthless. That's a whole other thing, right? But Naomi decides that she's going to go back home because there's nothing for her, and her daughters-in-law are like, well, no, we'll go with you. And one of the daughters-in-law, she convinces and says, you can't, like, why are you following me around? There's nothing, like, I can't take care of you. I'm not going to have any more children. Like, you need to go find somebody who will take care of you and marry you. But Ruth refuses to leave Naomi, and that is what she tells her, saying that basically, wherever you go, I'm going. Whoever your God is my God. There's other reasons of like why it's in the Bible or whatever, but essentially it's the illusion that I think is being drawn here is just 2 women who refuse to leave each other.
Yeah, that's beautiful, actually. I think that's really, really powerful. And not just 2 women who refuse to leave each other, but 2 women who are like lost and alone in the world, and their only point of reference is really each other.
Yeah. Back to the inevitably tragic ending of Gideon the Ninth. We finished the whole book this week, and we're going to do a retrospective episode. But for now, Hannah, Brooke, John, if you were to sum up the whole book of Gideon the Ninth in just one word or phrase, what would it be?
I just want to point out before I give my phrase that this is super important because what Marie told me was lesbian necromancers in space, which I didn't think was a very compelling book description. After having read it, I would suggest a fantasy murder mystery in space. Super simple! Super plain! Gets to the point, tells you what to expect.
I feel like it's barely in space. I feel like I would assume that's on a space station, Brooke.
It's about the settings and the vibes.
Is there really anything that could have told you what to expect with this book? I mean, this is for the retrospective, but truly. Is there any way that I could have explained this book?
No. But you never really can. But I mean, you need to go and I think, I don't know, personally, I enjoy having the vibes set ahead to know if I'm going to enjoy the vibes.
Yeah.
And actually, if you had told me,
how would you describe the vibes?
If it's a fantasy murder mystery in space, like that's what's going to be happening. That's the feelings you get. You get fantasy and sci-fi situation, although it's really more fantasy than sci-fi. It just happens to be in space. And I also don't believe that this book does not feel super post-apocalyptic in the way that like you'd expect like a Mad Max or something.
Oh, for sure. It doesn't. It doesn't hit as post-apocalyptic.
No,
It's,
so I wouldn't
maybe
use
that's
that in
the
the
history
vibes.
of it. But
Yeah, no, it's
agreed.
fantasy there.
I agree.
Yeah,
It hits
the
as
vibes are fantasy.
post-apocalyptic, like sort of Shannara is post-apocalyptic. That's a deep cut. Nobody knows.
I don't know what that is.
About. It's fine.
Nobody responded. Sorry. Okay, John, what is your word or phrase?
I think necromancers in space does not. I think the Cavaliers deserve more respect, and so the fact that they're not mentioned in here, it's not just lesbian necromancers; it's also lesbian Cavaliers.
John is like, swords matter too.
Yeah, exactly. Listen, we kill the big bad guy of the book with a sword. All right, we do some necromancy to get there, but we do kill her with a sword. So I don't know how you would sum it up, but just incredibly well written and planned out. Like there's just so many Easter eggs and everything. There's no like Chekhov's necromancer in this in this book. There's a sprinkle of something somewhere, and then it's paid off at some point. And almost all of it has been paid off in this book. And if it hasn't, I'm assuming it's going to be paid off immediately in the next book or the book after. For me, it felt very good to actually be murder boarding, because it felt like there was going to be, like, if I figured it out, there was actually going to be a reward at the end. Like, I would know what was coming, as opposed to maybe a less well-planned or less well-written book.
I think mine is duality and trust. Like, I feel like the entire thing is about relationships and how they break apart and how they come together, and the ways that you rely on one another, and the ways in which you rely too much or too little on one another.
My phrase is, ow, my heart.
Ow, my heart.
Ow, my heart.
With those last words, let's sit back, relax, and let our second souls take over as we discuss the final chapters of Gideon the Ninth in episode 18. What's done is done is done. Act 2. We can't go home again.
This section of Frontline 5th is safe for anyone who has finished Gideon the Ninth.
Let's recap. Chapter 37, Gideon's skull, ninth crossed out, sunglasses, and a jawbone, also known as a mandible.
True.
In Chapter 37, Gideon tells Harrow to get up. Round 4, Death of Cytherea the... Oh! God, you go a week. Death of Cytherea the First. Epilogue, First House Skull. Harrow is bereft. Bodies left behind at Canaan House. Harrowhark the First.
So, I do want to point out that when we get Gideon's skull, I love that it's not the ninth house skull, because the ninth skull specifically doesn't have a jawbone, because the ninth is supposed to be silent and not talking, and that is not Gideon. And it's obviously got her sunglasses, and the ninth is crossed out because maybe she's not really ninth. And that is the skull that is on the book's spine as Hannah is like coming back with her book to be like, look!
I really appreciate that a lot, actually.
Easter eggs.
Another bone joke, actually. It's on the spine of the book.
Go to the page where it says Act 5. There are 10 skulls.
Oh, holy shit. Nice find, Brooke. I didn't notice that. So on all of the act pages, we get all of the 9 houses' skulls in like descending order. You are completely right, Brooke.
On Act 5, you get all 9.
Plus Gideon's. What does that mean?
I'm so here for it. The other thing about Gideon's skull is it's not just that it has a mandible. The mandible is open. That skull is grinning, and I fucking love it. That skull says, come at me, bro. Like,
we start out this chapter with the soul of Gideon speaking to Harrow and telling her to get up. Because the shield of regenerating bone around Harrow and Camilla and Gideon's body breaks, and Harrow needs to face Cytherea now as a lictor herself, or trying to be a lictor. And she peels apart the theorems powering Cytherea's terrifying bone monster like it's nothing. And Gideon tells her to pick up the sword, and Harrow's noodle arms really can't lift it on her own. Is this the point where Gideon tells her, like, I hope you want to do push-ups for the next myriad?
Right. I hope you like lifting iron for the next period.
Yeah. And Gideon wraps herself around Harrow and helps her raise the two-hander.
It's so sweet.
Yeah. It's
Cheek to
sweet.
cheek.
It's also deep, it's deeply sad. It's oddly, not oddly, but it is intimate and touching and romantic in a weird way, that like cheek to cheek. It's got the like ghost thing going on.
It's every like romantic comedy thing, right? Where you put your arms around somebody.
You're showing her how to handle the sword.
No, exactly. But this is like, I'm serious. It's like the movie Ghost, where like they, arms around from behind doing the pottery wheel, and you're like, ooh, this is oddly a lot. Yeah. It's also,
but it's not that. There's a distinction because, the very first time that happens, there's like tangible space between you and the person doing that. It's only once you've been together for years and years and years that you comfortably settle your cheeks against their cheeks. That is something that you've done forever, right? That is a comforting, comfortable move.
You can only do that with true intimacy and trust, where your bodies are almost one. Yeah, I love that. I also want to mention here, I think it's so fascinating the degree of power that a lictor has, right? We go from Harrow like working her ass off to try and like make this bone construct stay still in our last episode. And here she can just see it, and it's like a thing of no particular grace. She can pick it apart like it's nothing.
And then she defenestrates it. She throws it out a window.
SAT word for you.
It's really great to have an opportunity to use it.
But all of this is going on while Harrow is bereft, because she says, I cannot conceive of a universe without you in it. But Gideon's like, we don't have time to talk, because I'm basically a hallucination produced by your brain chemistry while coping with the massive trauma of splicing in my brain chemistry.
Can I also point out that when Harrow says, I can't conceive of a universe without you in it, Gideon's actual response is, yes, you can. It's just less great and less hot.
Yep. Gideon's like, I don't know much, but I do know the sword, and now you do too. And so now it's going to be really interesting, because you're going to see tiny little Harrow the same way that Gideon watched Ianthe move like Nibirius, and she could see Nibirius when Ianthe is fighting. Now you've got tiny little, necromancer Harrow, which I went deep this week, and I was reading an Ask Me Anything thread from Tamsin, where she was asked if Harrow and Gideon were dogs, what they would be.
Mm-hmm.
And she describes
it's gotta be a Chihuahua
Harrow
for Harrow
as like not just a Chihuahua,
Terrier.
but like one of these massively fucked up, like disgusting little like inbred tiny little dogs. Like the really messed up like Chihuahua
little
crosses.
The toy-sized multi-poo.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but like a scraggly one that like is not cute, right? Like that's like
has
how
to be
she,
scraggly.
Yeah, like that's how she describes Harrow. And then Gideon.
Oh my god, are we talking
She
about like the
describes her-
Deadpool dog?
No, she describes her kind of. She describes Gideon as a Valhund, which is essentially a Swedish corgi.
Okay, hold on. How do we spell this?
I think
Valhund.
it's
Valhund?
VAL.
Oh yeah, it
Oh.
comes right on up.
This is so funny. I feel like Gideon has
so
like pitbull
cute.
energy, where like Gideon is like can sink her teeth into things, but also does want to roll over and have belly pets. Like
A Swedish Valhund has like the ears, the eyes, the nose of a like hunting dog, a wolf, and then the body of a corgi.
Yeah.
It's just, the Swedish cow dog.
Yeah.
Wait, can I ask you all, what do you think about this thing that Gideon says, that she's basically a hallucination? Like, what do you think is going on here in the real and physical sense?
Oh, are you asking about the science behind this? Behind brains and souls?
No, but I think it's an interesting and complicated moment. Harrow's physical body should not actually be able to lift that sword.
No, but also like the concept of souls transferring and being only partly there but not completely there is also weird. Like I fully expected after what we saw Ianthe, what was going on with Ianthe with fighting quote unquote Nibirius, and then Cytherea talking about her own Cavalier Love Day, I think it was. Being around for centuries. So I fully expected Gideon just to be kind of like a voice in her head for long term. And we get her for like
a really long time.
a minute.
It's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I feel like it's a process but there's like stages to the process, and you really only get that kind of like presence of, I think it's kind of like the whole thing of saying like, oh, you can read my mind. And she's like, no, it doesn't really work that way. I think that that's kind of similar to like what's going on here is like, yeah, she can feel Gideon and Gideon's soul and Gideon's memories and like have it almost talk to her in her brain, but it's not going to last very long.
See, I was kind of on that until in the next chapter in the epilogue, which we'll get to, like Gideon doesn't really talk at all, right? Like her voice is entirely absent from it. So I was like, oh, maybe it's just literally an entire hallucination.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
Regarding the physicality part of this, though, I mean, yeah, you have to suspend disbelief, I believe, to some extent.
Well, and I mean, the thing is that we know that the reason that this works and the reason that lictors are so incredibly powerful is because souls are powerful and have a powerful amount of energy.
So, but there is something to be said for just like knowing what muscles to activate to do something.
Mm-hmm. As we talk about having to relearn walking.
Yeah, no, I have an analogy for this, which is that, I wasn't raised playing like hand-eye coordination sports. And so I never really like learned how to throw a football. And I never could until one day it was actually our mutual friend, Josh, who like gave me like 1 minute little lesson about here's what your shoulder's doing, here's what your arm's doing, here's where you're looking. And I managed to throw a football without it just like, I don't know, spinning chaotically and dropping real quick. It was like,
right, you needed to know the physiology behind it. Yeah.
And so I think that's what's kind of happening here is, there's a lot to be said for just having the biomechanics behind it. And that's what somehow Gideon's brain chemistry is providing here. It's her memories, basically, muscle memory.
Yeah, well, like while she's fighting, it's described as like Gideon fixes her stance and shifts her hips.
Right, shifts where her hands are.
Josh might be a lictor. He might have a tiny fragment of the spirit of Ohio inside him.
See, and meanwhile, I was going to say like how hilariously sixth house Brooke's story is.
Learning swordplay from a book.
Exactly. She's like, I needed to know which muscles to move in order to throw the football.
I feel like that's how Camilla learned sword fighting, though, and she's incredibly effective, so it works.
No shade on the sixth house. You know they're my people.
While this is happening, right, during the fight, they turn and face Cytherea, and Cytherea kind of looks at her like shocked, like surprised. Like she just watched somebody become a lictor, and I don't know if she ever saw the other lictors become lictors, but in any case, like this hasn't happened in 10,000 years where she's like watched it happen. And she's got this kind of like, oh, look on her face. And she asks, how do you feel, little sister? Because she's so fucking creepy.
Yep.
And they fight. And as they fight, Harrow starts being able to sense and understand Cytherea's really serious weaknesses because Cytherea is spending nearly all her energy keeping the turbo cancer that Sextus gave her at bay. And Harrow just pushes a little bit more at Palamides' spell, and it knocks completely out of Cytherea's control. And Owl, at the same time, her sense memory of Gideon is growing fainter and fainter, and her voice is disappearing, and so is the feel of her arms, and that's where Gideon gives her beautiful the land that shall receive thee dying verse.
Doesn't feel very Gideon-ish, right?
No.
That is interesting. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that Gideon would know even, let alone say.
Right. Do you think this is maybe one of these weird effects of like trying to merge brain chemistries and starting to get it wrong?
I think it's like the merging and the hallucination. And so Gideon tells her this and then says something very Gideon-esque.
Yep.
And says, see you on the flip side, sugar lips. And Harrow stabs like the core of the malignancy that Palamides incited in Cytherea's cancer lungs, and Cytherea dies almost with like relief, it seems.
Big sigh.
Yeah.
Big sigh of relief.
I don't think she's happy she died, but I think she's like okay with it.
I mean, she's been clear the entire book about how, she says death must be such a triumph. Death must be like the only escape where they can't touch you anymore.
And also it looks like she didn't have lungs.
She coughed them up multiple times, maybe?
I thought there were 2 times we saw her cough up a lung, and now it looks like there were no lungs in that space. So maybe you can't regrow organs as a lictor? I was thinking about this because Ianthe lost an arm, and you could heal wounds, so why can't you regrow an arm?
I'm assuming that she's getting a Luke Skywalker type arm attached to her.
Cool.
Yeah, so Kitharia is done, and so Harrow... I mean, this is also another part, like, during the fight that also I think is just absolutely heartbreaking, is, like, Gideon's telling Harrow, like, you can stop screaming now, and don't you dare fucking look at my body. Like, don't you dare look at me. Like, stop looking at me. And now that the fight is over and Gideon has left her, she runs to Gideon's body and pulls her off of the iron spike, and she just sits there with Gideon's body.
It's an interesting format, too, because this chapter is so fucking short, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we just had the last chapter, which was this long, drawn-out battle where there's multiple times where you're like, oh, they're winning, no, they're losing, oh, they're winning, no, they're losing, oh, they're, like, and this one is like this simple moment when everything crystallizes and Harrow can see how to pick apart the theorem and exactly where to stab, and she does it, and it's done. It's so fast.
I think it makes it, like, hurt even more, because basically this entire thing is like...
It was so simple, if only.
It was so easy to do if you have the power of a lictor, but that power, that cost is, like, too much. Sometime later, the next chapter, Harrow Hark wakes up in a hospital room in space. And sitting in the corner of the room is the Necrolord Prime himself, the Emperor of the Nine Houses, our Resurrector God.
I love how this, like, scene is set up, because it opens and it's like this, like, gently lit room, and the entire way through, like, the narrator Harrow is, like, describing it as irritating and awful. It's like you can just sense the amount of violence she's feeling when she wakes up.
Yeah.
I love it. It's all these soothing things, and she hates it.
How did you guys feel about meeting God, like the literal Emperor God?
It made sense.
I think we're going to talk about the eyes in a second here, but like everything else, like, is just, and anytime Tamsin repeats herself, I've learned that is very, very important. So I'm wondering where this is going to lead. She constantly says how just unimpressive this guy is, like, from just like a physical standpoint. Like, he has just nondescript, dark hair. He's got a boring haircut. He's not handsome. Hair, yeah. He's just like, he's entirely unremarkable, except for the fact that his eyes are like black with oily rainbows in them.
Or as Hannah has written in the show notes, frankly, bonkers.
Yes. Which now
I feel like if you don't use frankly bonkers, we should have used that to describe the whole book. I take back
frankly
my earlier
bonkers.
thing. Yes. Frankly bonkers.
It's not, now I understand why the priest and teacher had rainbow sashes, because if it seems like the only remarkable thing about the Emperor is that he has rainbow eyes. It's like his most striking physical
rainbow
feature.
Eyes.
Well, it's talked as like iridescent.
Iridescence. Okay.
Well, they also, so like she recurrently refers to it. She will, I mean, I don't think this is a spoiler at all. Every time she talks about his eyes, she'll talk about them as like oil slick spills.
Okay.
That they're like black, but with that rainbow iridescence at the same time, which is a weird combo.
I also don't think that this is necessarily a spoilery, but like the closest thing of like trying, without it being like just completely and totally like costumey looking, of like what it would look like, possibly, look up blue whale eye.
Oh, I hate it. Nope. Oh God, I'm really uncomfortable by that. What is that?
That's cool.
How is this is not a normal eye. What the shit?
Wait, I thought a deep rainbow oil slick, right?
Yeah, so like maybe like the center is like more like iridescent than that, but just generally like what it might look like. I'm like, that gives me a better like visual of like what it might look like.
Black on black with a white ring and iridescence in it.
But anyway, yeah, so he's just a dude. He's simply dressed. He's working on flimsy and a tablet. He's the only person we've ever really been described as carrying around a tablet. Like, we haven't seen anybody working with tablet. We've just been seeing people like working with weird parchment or flimsy or paper.
Is it a literal tablet or a tablet?
Like, I think it's like a phone, like a tablet.
Like a phone or an iPad.
Yeah.
Like, isn't one of the necromancer theorems written on like a literal stone tablet at one point?
Like, the impression that I get is that it's like an iPad.
This is my impression was that it was a stone tablet, but this is Marie's thing is that she thinks that they were like computer screens anyway. Either way, the emperor is always carrying around like a phone iPad thing. I mean, he's just a normal man. Like, he might as well be John. You could totally play him. Like, can we imagine? John, lean forward so we can see your eyes. Come see your eyes.
What do your eyes look like?
My eyes are unremarkably hazel.
Okay, fine. But Harrow, like, immediately knows that this unremarkable person is the Necrolord Prime and falls to her knees in front of him and begs for the return of the life of Gideon Nav. She says, undo what I've done. And he says, even he can't undo what she's done. He cannot give her back the life of Gideon Nav. And, basically tells her she's just going to have to live with it. And she says, how dare you ask me to live with it? Like, basically, strike me down, smite me. Like,
yeah.
How dare you ask me to live with it? You who knew what it was and asked me to do it. And you're still going to ask me to live with it.
To be fair, he's not like flippant about it. He's not like, sucks to suck. Like, he seems so deeply saddened by this. He's like, I'm so sorry. No one was supposed to die unwillingly. Like, I'm so sorry, but this is done. Like, there is no way to undo it. It's a really interesting back and forth.
And he basically asks her, like, not only is it done and I can't undo it, but also I really need you. Because, how did you feel about this, John? The Empire is dying.
Nailed that shit in like our third episode. I'm very happy about that. We got so much backwards in this, but we nailed that.
That was all you, John.
Yeah. So, there's something out there that God and his hands, which is what he calls his lictors, right, have been fighting since the resurrection, and he needs new lictors. No one was supposed to lose their lives unwillingly at Canaan House, but Cytherea, who lived 10,000 years in pain, made her choice. And
I will also say that, like he says quite specifically, no one was supposed to lose their lives unwillingly. Like, he knew that best case scenario, 8 people were going to willingly give themselves up to the lictor process.
Yeah.
I also think it's interesting, like, the way that he describes his lictors, because he says, most of my lictors have been destroyed by a war. I've thought best to fight slowly through attrition. I have lost my hands, not just to death. The loneliness of deep space takes its toll on anyone, and the Necrosaints have all put up with it for longer than anybody should ever be asked to bear anything.
I have theories.
All right, we'll come back to the theories.
This is a little delayed, but I'm thinking back to the letter he sent to the houses, and it sounds like he was very genuine about, like, if you don't want to do this, you can go home afterwards. Like, I guess that wasn't a lie.
And yet,
it's so hard to tell. He could have been explicit about what the lictor process was.
And this is also an interesting thing, though, is, like, I think that the only person who would have willingly become a lictor is the only person
who
willingly became a lictor.
I agree.
There's a part of me that wonders if Judith and Marta wouldn't have done it out of, like, classic duty.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They might have.
No questions. Marta would have killed herself to become, for Judith. Yeah.
But they literally didn't even bother to go down in the facility. They never would have been able to do it because they didn't bother to learn. It's this combination of, like, God could absolutely have told them ahead of time that this was a suicide mission for half of them and did not, and intentionally left it, like, vague and loose, and at the same time seems to be genuinely distraught at what his lictors have gone through for so long and at what he's asked Harrow to do.
Harrow asks, well, who else survived? Because when she probably passes out from all of this holding Gideon's body, the only thing that she knows, right, is that Cam was wounded, but with them. Palamedes is dead. Ianthe should be a lictor, and somewhere maybe Corona should still be around, and Marta's
fully dead. Judith is mostly dead.
But who knows, depending on when people got rescued, right? So she says, who else survived? And the emperor tells her that Ianthe, minus an arm, is with them, but they did not recover Judith, Corona, or Camilla. And they also don't have Gideon's body. And he couldn't even help with the search because he cannot go down to the planet to search. He can't help them. So with that news,
I really wish our listeners could see John's face right now. His eyes have narrowed. He's got this smile like, it's got to fuck around and find out kind of energy.
And then God promises to renew the ninth house, which is, this is everything that Harrow was striving for. This is like why she went through with it, was to fulfill her promise to her people. And he asks Harrow to become a saint, one of his fists and gestures. And Harrow says, yeah, I'll have to go back home eventually, though, because I have to find out what happened. But for now, I'll be your lictor. And God, king of the nine houses, Necrolord Prime, tells her, then rise, Harrow Hark the First. The world is a lot less great and a lot less hot, but the Empire has gained another saint in the august personage of Harrow Hark the First. And it looks like a struggle to save the world is imminent. So it's time for a game! Interstitial.
Wow.
Rise, Harrow Hark the Ninth. I lied. Harrow Hark always lies. I just do it sometimes. It's not time for a game, but it's time for two! Woo! That's right. This week, for 1 week only, we are not going to play not one, but two fabulous Frontline 5th games. We don't know Camilla VI's situation, so there's a very real possibility Harrow will be haunted for eternity by Palamity Sextus's ghost. And to prepare for that possibility, we are giving our listeners an afterlife subscription to Palamity Sextus's Top Nerd Facts.
Woohoo! Okay, I'm done.
In this highly educational game, we will ask each of our hosts to show off their knowledge of the bizarre by playing true truths and a lie. Each of our hosts will give us 3 bizarre nerd facts, 2 true, 1 false, and the rest of us will have to winnow the wheat from the chaff. John, you're up first.
Okay. Humanity has never seen 2 great white sharks having sex. In 1932, Australia lost a war to a bunch of emus, and there are 2 1/4 popes per square kilometer at the Vatican.
What? I need what?
1/4? What was the first one?
We've never seen 2 great white sharks having sex. In 1932, Australia lost a war to emus.
That is also
That's
true.
probable as
There
well.
are 2 1/4 popes per square kilometer at the Vatican.
That one I believe entirely.
Alive or dead?
They have to be
dead.
including bodies. They must be including bodies.
But then why is there only 1/4?
Well, I mean, there's
you
enough
take
of
them
them that once you
around?
divide it out,
What is
Per
the
square
mileage of
kilometer.
Vatican City?
it's
Do they
average.
take parts of popes and put them in other places? Is it like a weird, like, churchy thing?
First of all, that's very
Necromancy.
That's very shit. What was the name of that crypt that I sent you to, John?
Yeah.
Capuchin.
The Capuchin crypts. It's very Capuchin crypts. It's very Mithraeum. But
I'm gonna
I
say
think
the
number
lie
1
is number 1. We have
too.
seen great white sharks having sex.
I think
I'm
so
in
too.
as well.
Yeah.
we all agree.
We're in agreement.
Tell us, John.
Wait, we think the lie is that we have seen great white sharks having sex?
Yes.
You guys all guessed correctly. The lie is that we actually have seen 2 great white sharks having sex, but we saw it for the first time in 2021. Before that, it
No
was considered
shit.
one of the holy grails of marine biology. We had never been able to see it before. So it's a very, very recent
Holy
discovery.
Grail. Sharks getting it on.
Yes.
Well, it's also like we don't know where eels come from.
Wait, we don't know where eels come from?
No, that's a whole other thing. We'll do that later.
Yeah, in 1932, emus were running rampant and destroying crops and like just basically causing problems in Australia. And so they brought the military in to kill them. And so they fought a war against emus and made no actual difference. And the population of emus continued to grow. So Australia lost a war to emus.
Team Emu forever.
There are 2 1/4 popes per square kilometer at the Vatican because the Vatican is less than 1 square kilometer. It is...
Oh.
Ah.
I looked that up. It's 0.49 square kilometers. And I was like, yeah, there's plenty of room to have.
So it's literally, it's not even dead popes. It's just one pope is the equivalent.
It's about the denominator.
Boo, boo.
I love that for you, John. Excellent job.
Yes, those are your nerd facts for the day.
Although that's one of those fun things that sample size matters because there are not 2 1/4 popes per square kilometer in the Vatican. There is one, no matter how you sample it.
I agree with Brooke.
Even if you sample it 4 times over, there will always only ever end up being one.
So
Statistics
funny.
is always lies. That's what this proves.
Yes.
Okay, Brooke.
Okay. So, you guys are aware that I have been working in the dairy agricultural industry for the last 3+ years. So my facts are all about cows. Okay. Except one of them's a lie, and I want to know which one you think it is. Okay, so number 1, cows fed corn make more methane than cows fed grass. Number 2, cows are pregnant for 9 months, just like humans. Fact number 3. A modern dairy cow can easily make 100 pounds of milk per day.
Oh my God.
All right.
100 pounds.
Wait, hold on.
Seems like so much, but it cannot be 9 months. It cannot be 9.
I think the third one's a lie just because why are we measuring milk in pounds and not gallons? But that's just me.
That's intriguing that it actually matters the unit. My main response to this is a desperate need. I'm like, my hands are in fists. I'm trying so hard not to Google. I could also see.
Is it number 1?
Ooh.
Cows fed corn make more methane than cows fed grass.
I feel like that's true.
Number 2, cows are pregnant for 9 months, just like humans.
I don't.
Or number
think that's
3.
True.
Okay, so Marie votes for number 2, and then number 3, a modern dairy cow can easily make 100 pounds of milk per day.
I'm going to go with 3.
3.
No, because if you're doing it in pounds, like that's really not that many gallons, right? Like a pound or a gallon of water is 7 pounds.
It's actually 8.
I'm going
0.5.
with.
I'm still going 3.
I think that cows fed grass make more methane. That's right. We're going with one of us each hedging our bets.
Hannah's correct!
Yes!
Yeah.
Cows are pregnant for 9 months?
Cows have a gestational cycle of 9 months, and actually the industry is set up so that a cow basically has a baby every single year, and they're making milk for they end up making milk for 9 months, and then they're dry for 3. And then they get pregnated on a schedule so that a year later, ideally, they're pregnant again, or they give birth again and start making milk. The reason we measure milk in pounds is because it gets put into a tank, and then the tank sits on a scale on the way out, and it tells you how much the farmer made.
Okay.
Put in the tank. And it's just a lot easier to measure things by weight than volume. And it's actually, milk is 8.6 pounds per gallon, whereas water, I think, is 8.5 or something, because it's got fat and protein. I can't remember water exactly. I might be wrong on the water, but I'm right on milk.
And so cows make more methane when they're fed grass because it's less like already sugar. There's more.
Yeah, it's got a lot more fiber. It's the breakdown of fiber that produces a lot of hydrogen. And hydrogen drives the reaction to turn carbon dioxide into methane in anaerobic conditions.
My God. I think that our fact sets are telling us a lot about what we think about all day. Mine are all about weird animals.
How do we classify John's?
Roman Empire.
Yeah, one of them touched on the Roman Empire, yeah.
All right, here are mine. Draco lizards have normal arms and legs, as well as wings made out of long webbed ribs. Felids, which are cats, have lost their clavicles, we know that's collarbones, over the course of evolution. All birds use a novel organ, the syrinx, not the larynx, in order to produce sound.
I feel like number 3 is absolutely true. I think that's true.
I like the idea of clavicles being lost for cats too, although it's very specific.
That
It
seems
could be
weird.
anything. You could substitute anything in there and making a lie.
It also seems, although I think that that's the lie. I think
Me
that
too.
Draco lizards are making wings out of ribs. I think that is how they're
I think cats have lost something else over the course of evolution.
not the baculum.
I'm going with 3. Birds use a novel organ.
Well, Brooke and Marie are correct. Cats still have their clavicle, but it is massively reduced. It's really tiny and it's floating. It's not connected to anything. This is why cats can squeeze into fascinatingly small spaces.
Oh, because that's why I wondered about that, because they don't have, like, you can shrink this part because your shoulders aren't, like, constrained.
Exactly.
That's cool.
And Draco lizards, which are one of my all-time favorite animals, are these very cool lizards that are endemic to Indonesia and Malaysia, and Southeast Asia in general. general. And they do have arms and legs, as well as, technically they're not wings, they're patagia, but they are long extended ribs that they can unfold that have webbing between them. And they hold on to the end of it like it's a cape and they glide.
I did not realize that they had to hold a cape.
Cool.
That's so cool.
I did kind of know that they
so
exist because they look like little tiny dragons. Like that's why they're
desperately want to work on them, and both my bosses are like, Hannah, no, and I'm like, but yes, and they're like, no.
Keep working on that
and
question.
Then birds actually have a larynx, but they only use it to modulate the sound. They produce the sound from the syrinx, which is a new organ. It's right where like their lungs meet their trachea, right where the bronchi meet the trachea. And it's really different in all different birds. So like parrots have crazy muscles around it so that they can make all of the different noises they make, whereas something like a duck or a goose has a more simple one, although, duck asterisk, because they have some really cool morphology that my friend Darcy works on. So now you know some weird animal facts. Marie.
Well, here we go. Microbiology.
Let's go. Let's see if my PhD in microbiology gives me any advantages here. It probably won't.
Also, mine are deliberately misleading in all ways. Okay,
I'm so proud. This is the only one I know the answer for sure on.
I know, but you have an unfair advantage, so you don't get to talk.
Okay.
Bacteria have membrane-bound organelles. Animals have chloroplasts, and malaria is caused by algae. I love Brooke's face. She's like, none of these make fucking sense, especially, it's even worse if you have a PhD in microbiology.
Malaria is caused by algae. I feel like you're like
deliberately misleading.
Right, so like, are they all kind of lies? And all kind of truths?
Like Cytherea as Dulcinea being like, hypothetically.
Yeah.
I feel like bacteria definitely have membrane-bound organelles, right? Am I correct? It's been a while since I've used any of my biology stuff. Animals have chloroplasts.
Actually, not traditionally. Bacteria are like themselves a membrane-bound organelle, kind of fundamentally. That's the whole hypothesis, is that mitochondria were derived from a bacteria, bacterium. But I know that she worked in an algae lab that had heterocysts, which are kind of specialized cells along a string of cells.
Yeah, but that's differentiation. That's not necessarily an organelle.
It's not internal, and I'm not familiar with the idea of having internal membrane-bound organelles unless there's...
Yeah, the like traditional definition of bacteria you get taught about in high school or whatever is that they don't have any membrane-bound organelles. Famously, of course, chloroplasts are plant things.
Yeah, but animals eat plants, so I don't know if we're going with that sort of generalization of having, just meaning possession of, even if you can't use them. Malaria caused by algae? That's outrageous. I don't like that one, so I'm saying the malaria caused by algae is your lie, because I want to know how you justify that.
No,
do you have any, John?
I'm going to animals having chloroplasts.
Okay, Hannah, how about you?
I think that I'm pretty sure that malaria is caused by a protozoan called Plasmodium, which I think is an animal, not an algae. So I'm going with malaria caused by algae is a lie.
I'm an asshole. All of these are technically sort of true.
Yeah,
you'd be like, right. Dick!
I want to know how she's going to justify this shit.
Okay. So classically, the way that we say the difference between prokaryotes, which is bacteria and archaea, versus eukaryotes, which is everything else, animals, fungi, plants, algae, protists, is that we usually say that prokaryotes do not have membrane-bound organelles. I prefer the distinction that prokaryotes do not have a membrane-bound nucleus, nor do they have mitochondria, because if you say that they don't have organelles or they don't have membrane-bound organelles, then you start thinking that prokaryotic cells do not have organization or don't have compartments, and that isn't true. So, for example, there are cyanobacteria, which are photosynthetic, that create protein, like little cubby holes to do carbon fixation more effectively, and those are carboxysomes. But additionally, there's a really bizarre metabolism called anaerobic ammonia oxidation, or ANAMOX, where what the bacteria are doing is eating ammonia and breathing nitrite, which energetically is completely and totally bizarre.
Backwards.
Absolutely bizarre and upside down and backwards. But it does work. It only works if you do it inside a membrane-bound organelle inside the bacteria, because the intermediates are so fucking toxic. And so the bacteria that do anammox have anamoxysomes.
So
I feel like
because
biology is
thermodynamics
always a game of like exceptions. You learn
Exactly.
all the rules and then you get to learn why they occasionally
So
get
that's
broken.
why that's why I get very, very exact when I say what a prokaryote is. A prokaryote doesn't have a membrane-bound nucleus or a mitochondria. And eukaryotes do.
Boo.
Sorry. In terms of animals have chloroplasts, there are animals that have chloroplasts.
The sheep, the slug sheep. What is it called?
Sea sheep.
Sea sheep.
So this is for John. Google real quick a little sea sheep. They're so fucking cute. It's a sea slug
But it's
that steals the chloroplasts from the algae that it eats, and it can keep them alive for a while. So it can like keep them alive and use the photosynthetic properties of the
that's very cute.
chloroplast for a while.
Looks like a Pokemon.
Yes,
It
it's
does
amazing.
look like a Pokemon.
Yep. And then finally, the one that is the most misleading is saying that malaria is caused by algae. So malaria is absolutely caused by Plasmodium. It just so happens that Plasmodium is in the apicomplexans. And apicomplexans is
about to give us a taxonomy bullshit.
I am. Apicomplexans is a group of single-celled eukaryotes that have that name because they have apicoplasts. And apicoplasts are a degenerate chloroplast. So it is a chloroplast that no longer does photosynthesis, but they keep that organelle around because it helps them with iron metabolism and like.
So we're
lipid
counting it as having
biosynthesis.
derived from algae.
Yes.
But it's no
Boo.
longer. This is like saying all animals are
Boo.
fish, which is technically correct taxonomically. You can yell about that later. I'm a fan of this choice, Marie. I hate you a medium amount, but I love it so much.
Delightful. Learn
Sorry.
so much.
And because our chapters this week were so short, but also I don't think that it had any impact on how long we talked.
I thought it was going to be shorter than this.
We are going to play one more little game this week. Harrow got a new title, so we thought we'd take this opportunity to give out some honorary awards, titles, and degrees. In an A1 game we are calling No, You're the Greatest!
Oh, I'm so excited.
All right, I will go first. I am giving Marie a honorary PhD from Finland in audio engineering. That's the whole point. You're getting a sword because
Yes! That's what she always wanted.
but
Sorry, John, keep going.
in audio engineering / editing, because as someone who had to edit some of our bonus episodes this week and screwed up mightily on a few things, just
I don't
the
think so.
level of consistent quality that you've been able to crank out over these 18 plus episodes has been very impressive. So you get a sword and an honorary PhD.
Oh my god, I'm
Hell
so
yeah.
excited about the sword. Like that is like the one bitter thing is like it would be worth it to go get a degree
And do a
there.
PhD.
And get your sword.
Also, John, just low key, like Marie is a goddess, but you did a great job. Please, like you did a
Absolutely.
great
You
job.
did good.
Yeah.
Do not be down on yourself. I will accept the degree mostly for the sword, but
Mhm.
also
It can
do
be
not
a two.
denigrate
It
your
can be
own
a two-hander, or it can be a.
I was going to say, don't
rapier.
they typically
Rapier.
give out... Is
I
it
think-
actually a rapier?
I think it's
give
probably
you?
a rapier. No,
believe
I
it's
don't
a-
know. Maybe it's
I
a
think
saber.
they give you
I
something
believe it's a
pointy.
dress short sword.
We're gonna look up exactly what I get.
Yes, you
That's
get
extremely
a doctoral. Wait, it's literally just called a doctoral sword. Hold on. Oh, yeah, they look like sabers.
Yeah, pointy.
I mean, aren't most swords? Sorry.
Pointy.
Yeah, I feel like pointy is part of the like job description for sword.
Yeah, and then you look at like a claymore or something, and you're like, that's more just like a bashing stick.
True.
You're like,
okay,
it's a
anyway.
baton. Go on.
I get to give a series of titles to Hannah in the
Oh.
vein of like the whole Daenerys Targaryen Mother of Dragons thing that I don't know all her titles.
Yes.
But I'm so excited. Ready? Okay. Hannah, your new title is Hannah the Clairvoyant, Sorceress of the Spoken Word, Minister in the Order of Osteologists.
Sorry, I'm getting that tattooed on my fucking forehead, Brooke. That's amazing. One more time.
I'll
No
write it
face
down.
tattoos. No face tattoos. We all have careers and family.
You're right.
She is Hannah the Clairvoyant, Sorceress of the Spoken Word, Minister in the Order of Osteologists.
Oh, okay.
That's
Yeah,
good.
I'm humming. That's amazing.
That's good.
Thank you so much. I am deeply honored to accept all of those titles. I will require that you address me with my full name from here on out. I'm giving John a new award that I came up with. It's called Yes, Chef. And that's because he is unequivocally the man can cook. Like,
That's what I was gonna
the
say, he's
man
always
can
cooking.
cook. It was remarkable to watch you both over the period of time that we got to do this first book. But holy shit, you really were cooking with those
from
theories.
your wife being like, the monster you have created, he is murder boring at midnight.
So yes, chef.
This
It's one
is
of the best
amazing.
cooking
Okay.
podcasts
That,
at around
thank you.
midnight.
Now, I get to give Brooke the title that she has wanted for this entire book. And this is also, I'm so sorry, we just went through Nerd Facts. You know that you have a lifetime subscription if you're listening to this podcast. I have just spent 2 or 3 weeks teaching metabolism.
Ew.
And
One of my, fun hobbies.
and so I am going to give Brooke the title Necrolord Not Prime, but not N-O-T, N-A-U-G-H-T, kind of similar to like Delta
Like
G
zero?
Not Prime.
You're gonna have to explain this joke. None of us
Energetic.
have been teaching.
It's the energy related to
Brooke
biochemical
gets it.
pathways.
Brooke gets it. So you
This is the
determine
most-
whether or not.
Convoluted fucking title.
No, because you still get to be like it's the first thing that I thought of was like,
Necroloid
what you
not
wanted
She wants to be
was-
no.
You wanted to be Necrolord Prime, but also there is Delta G Prime and Delta G Not Prime, because Delta G Prime is when all of the like reactants in a chemical reaction are at like a 1 molar or something like that. But Not Prime is when the reactants are at standard conditions. So you are the Necrolord Prime at standard conditions.
Jesus
Dear
Christ.
Lord.
That's incredible. That's amazing.
Time for some biochemistry education.
Also, I have more awards. I'm going to give the cohort Unique Service Award to those of our listeners who are the only listeners in their country, state, or province. Because from the statistics on Podbean, I can see you there, our lonely listener in the Philippines, in the province of Nordrhein-Westfalen in Germany. I can see you in Wales. And I can see you in Victoria in Australia. I can also see you in Colorado, Arizona, Louisiana, and New Jersey. So keep it up, but also tell a friend. You don't have to be alone in this.
Yeah, there's no follow-up. We fucking love you guys.
Yeah.
I also want to give out some honorary necromancer awards to Muzzy, Zuko, Pepper, and Diego, who have all guest starred on the podcast.
Their
And
various
a
woofs and
full
meows and
necromancer awards to Taz and Oryx, who have managed not to guest star on the podcast. They are our only pets who have kept fucking quiet. I also want to give the Anatomist out to Robin, who helped write answers for Dr. Skellabone, and honorary Bone Witch to Sonia, who came up with several games this season.
There's no better feeling than to have your work recognized. But we can't sit around here basking in our own glory all day, because even though the book is finished, there's always more rampant speculation! Act 3. So the universe was ending. Good! Now is the time when we ask our no longer newbie necros to give us their conspiracy theories. So, Brooke and John, what the fuck is happening, and specifically, what is going to happen in the next book?
Yeah. John, let's see if we can hash our way through this. I mean, Act 1 of next book, it's got to be like a bit of like a lictor training arc, don't you think?
Yeah, we're going to have a montage with the 3 other existing lictors, it sounds like. We have 3 others based on the fact that he said you'll have 3 teachers, or maybe there's 2 and he's counting himself. But at least
we got to fix up those noodle arms.
we're gonna meet some lictors, and I imagine there's gonna be some fun banter between Ianthe and Harrow Hark.
Oh yeah. Oh God, Ianthe is also going to be in these classes. Oh, you're right.
I was picturing when they were fighting in Cytherea's lictor room. Now I was just picturing Babs like quaffing his hair as a hallucination and like trying to help Ianthe hold up the sword. Right after lictoring.
He was not helping. That was the
on
problem.
lip balm.
Yes,
Amazing.
but yeah.
So we have a training arc, and then I feel like after that we've got to get into like whatever else is going on in the universe, right? Maybe we go out into the wide open space. We got to figure out kind of what happened to Earth, right? So we've talked about that there's some sort of massive calamity. I think that this massive calamity like left us with just like a super small subset of humans. They were left in Canaan House. These were the beginning of the houses. Yay, nay?
I don't know yet.
Okay, and somehow this calamity is correlated with the resurrection in some way, shape, or form. I'm currently feeling, and so John, I want you to start because you have had this whole flood hypothesis this whole time that's like opening death. I want to know if that's changed. Like, what do you think we're going to learn about in the next book about what's happened to Earth?
Okay, I'm absolutely calling my shot, and if this happens,
We'll throw you a parade. Go ahead.
one of the things that's really interesting about these books is that we have like a almost scientific level of explanation around how thanergy and thalergy exist. Like it comes from cell death versus it's a very specific explanation. So my current theory is that when they discovered necromancy and our now nondescript random dude who's just God with his crazy eyes became God, like when they cracked open death or like the way into death to become necromancers, when we discovered necromancy for the first time, it also was essentially like Pandora's box, and we let death out of whatever contained area it was in, maybe across the river, it sounds like, or like we basically, the veil between life and death got narrow, and so death got out into the universe, which is, some of the, when I say death, I just mean like the kind of like corruption that took over Column's body and that type of thing.
Yes.
Like it's unsure if it's like demons or death or like some, stereotypical biblical and or like, religious death, evil deity type thing. So my current theory, and this is why they say war of attrition, is that we are genociding the rest of the universe to stop allowing for extra vessels for the corruption to take place in. So the reason the Empire is going around killing everyone is so that the corruption of death can't take over more bodies. So we're just going planet to planet. We're killing everything on the planet. We're killing the planet. And that is what God and the folks have been doing. And the reason why the lictors are killing themselves is because not just dying in battle, but also just seems like what sounds like killing themselves or just ending things, is that they are horribly depressed about the work that they are having to do. So we are basically killing the universe to stop the spread of death and allowing death to corrupt the world of the living, or something along those lines. If that is the case, I did not come up with this off the top of my head. It is based in a literary reference that I think is a reference I think is pretty relevant, but I'll explain that if we go farther down the line and this ever ends up being true.
Give us a hint on what you're inspired this.
I think I'll save it for further along here.
Wow. Okay, keeping your cards close to your chest. What do you think of the Emperor? We've met him. He seems like pretty empathetic. Do you trust him? What do we think about the eyes being very black, which is very similar to what happened to Column's eyes?
I didn't clock that at all, so that's something I'll have to chew on a little bit.
Yeah. I'm suspicious of the Emperor. Just, I feel like we've had a lot of suspicion up until this point, and so we meet him and he's like super empathetic. And part of me thinks, oh, it's a trap. Don't change all this evidence versus what somebody says. Actions speak louder than words.
The smartest person in the books thus far is Pal, and Pal seemed to think that he screwed up somewhere, or that like there was a mistake made somewhere.
It's a huge error.
So maybe we'll find that out at some point.
The other thing is like we see like Cytherea has gone nutso. All the lictors have gone nutso after 10,000 years. They seem to have lost touch in a large part with their sort of sense of mortality and humankind. So how come the Emperor is seems to be different? How come he is able to maintain his empathy? Like, my question is whether or not that's just purely a manipulation tactic and he can say the words without necessarily feeling them. And the fact that his eyes are black might even mean that he's not like fully human, right? Like, if we want to say that lictors are human in the first place, like humans with two souls, like maybe he's actually possessed by one of these things, or there's like a co-sharing. Maybe his lictordom, he absorbed the soul of one of these demons somehow, like, because they take on each other's eyes, like, so.
Or he's got so many eyes because he has so many souls. Like, maybe the teacher was just a like the prototype, and part of the reason he's so powerful is he literally has like the soul, like the souls of everything on Earth, and his eyes are rainbow or like rainbow oil slick, because isn't black, depending on who you ask, is like all colors or not any colors, and so his eyes are all the colors because it's literally just like an amalgamation of 10 billion souls that is actually what turned him into God, which would imply that he was the one that killed everyone.
I think he's made a deal with the devil. Okay.
Like a literal devil, or like metaphorical devil?
In this book, when death is real and tangible, I don't see them as being all that different. What is the definition of a devil to you?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I think I mean literal. I picture Hades from the animated movie Hercules.
Nice.
Is my hair out? Hair out?
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be so much fun.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, we have to get into this world a little bit. We're gonna go out and experience this firsthand a little bit, I think, in this next book. And then at the last act, the other thing that's unresolved, we got to figure out what happened to the bodies. Or the people.
Thank you, Brooke. I forgot about that. Eventually we're fighting a possessed version of Gideon, like Gideon's body. At some point, that's going to pop up in the story.
You don't know? Do you have a sense for who took it?
I think,
or it was just possessed by after her soul got.
Yes, because we'll just have it's an empty vessel sitting in Cannon House, which we know is not really a good thing. Teacher yells about that at the very beginning.
How come Gideon's body's not safe, but they managed to recover all the bodies in the morgue?
Because their souls were still in there. We took Gideon's soul out of her body.
What about Babs?
I don't know. Did they mention Babs? Did we get Babs' body?
Everybody else was accounted for except for Camilla, Judith, who was the other one? Corona, and Gideon's body.
Yep. And also, I think Cam is going to start a resistance against the Emperor. We're going to see her in like a Che Guevara moment down the road.
I'm on the same page with you except that I don't know why I think this exactly, but I kind of think that Camilla maybe got together or maybe took the body of Gideon, and maybe others, just because I don't know what happened. Like, we have this weird cutscene right at the end of the book where like Harrow's just looking at Gideon's body, and then suddenly she's waking up in a hospital room on a spaceship. So like, what? What happened? Maybe somebody knocked her out or something, which I don't know what the hell that is. But what we do know about Cam is that she knows what to do.
Yes.
So the question is, like, was Pal in touch with like the rebel forces?
Is there a rebel force at all?
Also, only partial remains of Pal were recovered. So like, I have some hope maybe that he's not like, well, no, he's probably very much dead, but whether or not there's something to do with his body, I don't know. I don't really understand that part.
Yep.
Yeah. So Cam. Okay. So Cam's gone. Rebel forces, or yeah, she's joining a resistance of some sort. That's cool. We're in agreement there. And then also the last thing is to set up the next book. I think the body in the tomb's got to get resurrected because I think that's Nona, and I think Harrow's going to do it.
I still think it's the body of God that our boy lictored.
Ooh. I still think it's Nona. Oh shit. Does she kill the Emperor in order to? No. Oh God. Can't take just one soul out. I think you're right, and I still think I'm also right.
Okay.
Well, we won't find out how right our brilliant Sixth House scholars are right away, because we are going to take a couple weeks off before we dive into Harrow the Ninth. But don't worry, dearest listener, we can't actually stay away, because next week we are going to explore Gideon the Ninth as a whole, talk about failed and successful conspiracy theories, and go through the glossary and other Gideon the Ninth add-ons. And the week after, we will publish 2 episodes. One is a safe episode, one is a spoiler episode on 2 of Tamsin Muir's Locked Tomb short stories. But for now, Hannah and I are off to talk spoilers.
If you, dear listener, are like me and John and reading along for the first time, make sure you find our reading calendar on our website, frontlinefifth.podbean.com, or follow us on Instagram or TikTok, which are both linked in the show notes. And if you like this podcast, please share it with your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And if you didn't like it, feel free to lie, please and thank you. Don't forget, you can join our Patreon for even more content. And so with that, now head off to sleep, my baby necros, because Mommy and Daddy have some deep spoilers to discuss.
Get in, losers. We're going speculating.
Act 4. See you on the flip side, sugar lips.
Warning, this portion of the podcast is 98% spoilers and like 2% snickering.
Seriously, we will spoil anything and everything in the series up through Nona the Ninth. If that's not what you want, turn back now!
Can we start with their theories for next book?
So I caught training montage. I'm so sorry you don't.
Right. I thought that was funny. I was like, logical, but not going to happen. Banter, yes.
Banter between Harrow and Ianthe, fucking amazing.
Oh, yeah. They're
amazing.
It's almost better than the back and forth between Harrow and Gideon, like, because they're just full sass.
Yeah, like Harrow getting the nickname Harry, just mwah. Also, they don't know what kind of fucked upness they're going to get between Harrow and Ianthe. No. They could, there's no way you could predict that.
Well, but that's the other thing you can't predict. So you were asking, like, is there anything that you could have said that would have predicted Gideon the Ninth as a whole? And I think the answer is no. I think the answer is even further no for Harrow the Ninth. There's no, like, single short phrase you can use to sum up what it's like to be insane in multiple timelines in which some things are real and some things are not, but everything is true. And the end is coming fast, but no one is preparing for it in like a reasonable or helpful way. So you're just getting little bits of plot amidst a lot of like scrabbling for details. It's like, it's just too much. You can't predict it. That said, they did make some predictions. I got to give Brooke MVP this week after, several weeks of John just cooking real good. The idea that Camilla is with the Resistance. Like,
holy shit, right. Camilla's with the Resistance. And also, because we didn't recover all of Palamides,
oh my god, that was gone. Such an incredible, what a fucking pull. I mean, Palamides exploded himself, and I can't believe she got that. And also that Camilla took Gideon's body, which I think is also really interesting.
Although we still don't totally know what happens in the cutscene. The fact that they're like, yeah, it's a really weird cutscene, and we like something happens. It's like, yeah, we don't know what happened. No. We don't know if Harrow was like, yes, please take the body, or if it was like an emergency kind of scrabble and like BOE did kind of like a smash and grab kind of a thing while people were distracted. Like, it seems to me like very weird that Harrow would not fight over Gideon's body.
You would think so, unless she knows that it's important to like keep it out of the hands somehow. Like we don't know what happens there. We don't know what information Harrow and or Ianthe learn from Blood of Eden, or if they contact Blood of Eden. And additionally, so like I've been thinking about this. How do BOE get there first? Either they are monitoring the transmissions, or Kytherea calls them ahead of time, or there are traders on the Emperor's flagship. All of those are possible. But they have to get there first, and they have to get there with a lot of things. So Palamides actually has this conversation with Judith. Or Mercy. Yes, I know. So like this is like a multi, it's hard to know what happened, but it's also hard to know why they would call in BOE necessarily. And Palamides has this back and forth with Judith when they find her stabbed through that says like, he's like, I can't save you, but a team of trained cohort medics could, which implies that BOE arrives with with enough medical power to take care of Judith and keep her alive. Like they come in reinforced. It's not just like one little casual shuttle that's like, hey guys, want to come on board? Like we have no idea what happens in that intermediate scene. And I'm really fascinated to know what Harrow learns about BOE from contact with them, and whether she learns anything about the Emperor. Because the things she says to the Emperor in the epilogue are not nice. Like which also we can get to. So what else did our not newbies catch? I mean, so Brooke wants the body in the tomb to be resurrected, and that sort of won't happen until the end of Nona the Ninth. Although we do get the body itself making a lot of shows up continuously crazy. In Harrow.
It's gonna make her
crazy. I think all of it is going to make them crazy. I think they're going to be disappointed at the lack of training montage.
Yeah, I mean, that would have been great, but sorry.
It works better this way because no one wants to touch Harrow. She's broken.
The only training montage we get is like the desperate, like, last month before number 7.
Yeah, and it's mostly other people. It's like Augustine and Gideon. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. That's the only training montage that you get where they're like, okay, good, but without air. Okay, again, but blindfolded.
Right. It's also really funny, in their discussion about the training montage, they brought up that Harrow does need to be like pumping iron in order to get her arms up. And I think it's hilarious. Harrow tells herself to do that. She doesn't.
And the first thing is Gideon's like, I told you to do push-ups.
You had one job and you had months to do it in. Oh, hold on one second. I want to grab my Kindle. I have a thing I highlighted.
That's good, dear listeners, because I also have a couple of things that I highlighted. Let's see if we're talking about the same highlights.
So here is the part that I highlighted, which I think is interesting. This is in the epilogue. She was empty. That was the terrible thing. There was nothing inside her but the sick and bubbling detestation of her house. Even the silence of her soul could not dilute the hatred that had fermented in her from the genesis of the ninth house downward. Harrowheart picked herself up off the floor and looked her emperor dead in his dark and shining eyes. How dare you ask me to live with it? And so you brought this up during the record that it's, you asked me to do this. How dare you ask me to live with it? But for me, there's also this component of it almost sounds like the lictors when they figure out that he's been lying to them all of this time. It makes me wonder how much the ninth house knows. And it goes back to what we talked about. The ninth house has this great secret that can only be spoken in salt water. And I almost wonder if the secret is the fucking secret of the emperor. The way she's looking at him with this much hate and this description of this hate that has been there since the genesis of the ninth house. And she's someone who loves her emperor. She loves her god. And at the same time, this description of this hate that has been there since the beginning is so fucking weird. It's such a little weird add-on that it felt like I wondered what she knows.
That is weird. Yeah, because it always hit me, even the very first time that I read this, it hit me how angry she is, and the fact that even though she has this deep reverence and is like, I know you are God, and also how dare you ask me? And you can read it either as the extreme anger and devastation of the soul from the loss that she is having to endure, right? Because that's a very common thing, or that's a typical part of grieving, right? Is losing your faith.
Yes, absolutely. Some people shift in faith. A lot of people gain faith. It's really interesting. Yeah, even later she says someone will burn for this. It just makes me wonder. It's possible she's literally just angry at him because he has put her in this position where she's had to do this horrible thing. But I think it's an interesting question what she knows. And she actually says he doesn't tell her, you can't go home again. She says, I can't go home again. And I feel like that's also really interesting that she seems to know. It could be totally metaphorical. I can't go back to the way things were. Or it could be explicit somehow that she is aware that she can't go back, and she becomes unaware when she performs. Clearly, she has not yet performed the lobotomy, right?
Right.
She must perform the lobotomy after this.
Yeah, I think it's probably the next day,
right?
That she does it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm looking for something because there's something that I wanted to talk about, and now I have all of my highlights, but I don't have all of my tabs, so it's making it harder for me to find everything, because there's one timeline, and it might be that I'm getting things mixed up between books. Yes, I did find it. They're both in this book, I believe. Okay, there's two things in this book that reference 300 years ago.
Interesting.
And so one of them is Cytherea, when they're kind of asking, when she's explaining what was happening during the lictor process. And, somebody says, why do you hate him? And she says, what do you mean I didn't hate him? This is when she's talking. Sorry, it took me a while to get where we're at. Okay, so there's cut everything before this. The thing that I am newly obsessed with out of this book is the reference by a couple different characters to something happening 300 years ago. And I believe that it gets mentioned again in Harrow, and now I'm going to be like on the like major alert for it, is that when Cytherea is talking with Palamedes and explaining how she became a lictor, and then explaining that she's had this plan to basically destroy the 9 houses and kill the emperor, she says, for example, I've been thinking about doing this for the last 300 years. Okay. And then in the cohort intelligence files, when Judith is discussing, like when she's talking about, I'm so sorry about talking about myself in the third person, blah, 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 here's all this stuff. I will be interested in acquiring for the cohort the first up-to-date intelligence on the first house in 300 years.
Ooh, that's fascinating. That's really, really interesting. That suggests that there actually was contact 300 years ago.
And then when you start looking in Harrow Hark about what time everything starts to really fall apart with the lictors, I believe that it's about 300 years ago.
Oh, I did not catch that at all. I think that's really interesting.
Something happens.
And you know that I have this fucking weird obsession with Canaan House's age because it has the whole range of ages, which to me, I mean, one, it could just be that like things there are, if it is somehow a pillar in the river, maybe it's connected by multiple time points and multiple locations and it's something that it's accessible. But it's clear that people have been there much, 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 much more recently.
Exactly. And then all of a sudden, nobody knows anything about the first house. Nobody's been there.
Yeah.
Something happened.
Multiple generations. That's fascinating. I will have to be on the lookout for that as well. Yeah, that's tingly. I mean, everybody, man, it's so interesting. God is very, very interesting from a number of perspectives. And also, I'm sorry, I really couldn't help it. I just like couldn't.
That was so mean. That was so fucking mean. Being like, it could be somebody just like you, John.
I couldn't help it. But I think he's actually he's an interesting and well-written character in that, you know, he is a self-absorbed douchebag who cares only about what he thinks is right, and what's right always aligns with him winning. Right? It's very 8th house in its style. At the same time, I think this is true for a lot of people like this. They can feel genuine remorse and empathy up until the point that it hurts them. Like, I think he is very genuinely sorry for what has happened to her. And it's so sad that it had to happen, but it had to happen. Like there's, you know, Brooke was wondering if it's manipulative, and I almost don't think it is. I think he genuinely believes up until the second someone does something like mercy to piss, you know, like blows him apart, pisses him off, and then he like immediately pivots. That he can in a second just drop someone. To be honest, it has aspects of borderline personality disorder where the second someone has burned you, they're dead forever, and they've always been dead forever. Anyway, I had somewhere I was going with this, I'm sure.
And I think that Brooke's reaction to him is so interesting because I think it was my reaction to him, which is the first time you meet him, you're like, this is unsettling. And I can't decide if it's unsettling because I expect God in this universe to be larger than life and he's just some dude, or if it's the things that he's saying, but something seems a little bit off. And then you continue to be like, well, actually, I think it's just a joke. I just think it's like genuinely just something that Tamsin was doing to like make it kind of like almost funny that God is just like some dude and it's like
just a guy with terrible analogies.
Like he's just a guy and he's got these dad jokes and he's saying these memes and like whatever. And then the mask comes off at the end of Harrow and you go, whoa. Oh.
Yeah, exactly. Because like you see a couple of moments where you like feel like darkness. So you're like, I can't believe he's the one who told Gideon to try and kill Harrow, but it's really not until you see him be exactly. You're like, no, it couldn't be. Yeah, it's interesting.
It must be for her own good. It very much must feel like how it is to like be in an abusive relationship.
Seriously though, because it like this thing where you're constantly making justifications for this other person's behavior. You're gaslighting yourself because you can't imagine that anyone could be that level of cruel, but he is in his like it's also, so it's interesting at the same time, he's very, very certain that he knows everything. He thinks of himself as omniscient, and he's not. Like, I think he is genuinely unaware of this back channeling with BOE from multiple of his lictors. And I feel like he is genuinely unaware of whatever happened potentially 300 years ago in order to shake their faith. Because it turns out—
I want to know how long ago Cassie died. I want to know how long ago Cassie died, because
we'll get into this as we go, but I have a theory.
Okay, well, I just listened to the part in Nona where Cam is like talking with Ianthe right before they have the duel, and Ianthe is going on about like sixth house oversight and blah 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 blah, and how did you guys even do it, and why did you do it, and like who tipped you off, or like kind of like just making flip comments, and Cam is like, we left for a lictor, and she was like, you can't have, because the lictor's dead. And she was like, no, she left instructions for us. Like, we have always, like, she told us, like, that's what I mean when I left. And Ianthe just kind of sits down and is like, oh my God, like, this will break him if he learns, like, that another one of his duplicitous sluts betrayed him.
Okay, here's the thing. So, I don't think that Cassie is fully dead in some way. She dies under suspicious circumstances incredibly early. She's I think she is the first one to die fighting a resurrection beast. And so it's like it's a weird circumstance. And she actually doesn't die to the resurrection beast. She dies mobbed by a horde of ghosts, and Mercy sees it from the shore. Like, she's not there with her. She sees it from afar. There's something weird about Cassiopeia, and Cassiopeia clearly was conspiring with Anastasia, like, from early on.
What if Cassie's been in a fucking bubble?
Right, I know, for literally 10,000 years. I was thinking about that too. I was like, river bubble, river bubble.
The fan theory that I think is absolutely unhinged and hilarious and makes me laugh every time is the theory that she's attached herself to objects a la Pal with the skull and Wake with the sword, and that the objects that she attached herself to is her ceramics collection.
Sorry, that's like my favorite line in the whole of Harrow the Ninth. What would we do with
What
your
are we gonna-
ceramics
she had
collection?
so
There's
much
so much
ceramics.
of it.
And I was like, I fucking love this theory so much. It's one of my favorite theories that I've ever read, is that, you know, she's just hanging around in a teapot, multiple teapots, just so that you can't get rid of her.
Maybe it works better. Maybe it works better if you like manage to split yourself between a couple of different, you know, items.
It's like Horcruxes. You know, you gotta have several of them so that you can't die. You can't be unanchored. But then, like, also, like, if she's being like taken apart by a horde of vengeful ghosts, is she just sitting in a river bubble? Has she been in a river bubble for like 5,000 years?
And what romance novels does she have to read there? Like,
is she just doing a better job of like hanging
ahead
on
of time,
because she's in her teapots?
Yeah, if you prepped ahead of time, you can make a lot of choices about it. Well, and clearly Palamides knows that this is an option. They had a plan that was based specifically on him hiding in a bubble in the river. Like,
and being attached
to a part of himself, which also makes me wonder, okay, so there's this thing in Harrow, in the Mithraeum, obviously there's bones everywhere. The place where they put Cytherea's body is a weird area. And actually, we'll talk about it when we get there. But there's these like pillars that are sort of like electrified, but also have like bones going through them. It's something you don't see anywhere else in the Mithraeum. And I wonder if there's something special about it. So especially if Cassie's bones are somewhere in that area, it would be interesting if she has preserved herself in her own body for some length of time.
But if she got torn apart by ghosts,
her soul did.
Oh,
in theory, right? But if it didn't, yeah, I don't know. The whole thing, I think, is I think it's highly suspicious. We'll have to get back to it. This is my rampant speculation for the age, is that, you know, we've got another lictor that we'll get to hang out with, which I would love, because I would love to meet Cassie. She sounds great. I bet her ceramics are not good. Like, they're
the way that everybody talks about them, I bet they aren't. Although everybody talks like there's things that people constantly reference that I think are like actually good things, right? Like they talk about Pure Debay being a fox. They talk about the ceramics collection. They talk about Nigella being an excellent cook. They talk about Ulysses and Titania's
Ulysses is a madman. He's Ulysses is always throwing orgies. Ulysses is throwing sex parties. All right, yeah. Oh, the Lictors were such a fun bunch.
Until they started dying. Yeah, I think it's also like just a weird way that he describes it of being like they're dying and also I've lost them to the loneliness of space. And I'm like, I think that this is him like referencing the fact that like that's another one of my favorite things in this is one of my favorite things in Harrow Hark is when Jod asks Mercy, he's like, oh, are you guys talking again? And she was like, no. He's like, are you guys on speaking terms? She's like, no, we're talking. That's not the same thing as speaking. We were talking as early as 20 years ago, you know?
Which also was
right. There's a reason for that timeline. Right? It is so funny. She's like, yeah, no, we talk. We don't speak. We're not on speaking terms. I'm like, you guys are fucked up and weird.
Oh, man. I really can't wait for them to start the next book. I'm really, really looking forward to it.
And also, and then we can come back to, like, when I was flipping through and I saw my highlights, the fact that Avulsion has an exclamation point.
Oh my God, that's really funny. Because Mercy speaks. She is remarkable. I love anyone who can speak and add punctuation as they go. She always has exclamation points when she talks. Like, hiss.
Yes. God, I love Mercy. She's so awful. She's the worst. Also, I think I would probably end up becoming Mercy. I would be Mercy after 10,000 years. I might. Act 5. See you next time, my little nunlets. It looks like we made it through Gideon the Ninth with minimal mortalities. I don't know if that's true, but it's fine. We'll see you next week when we return with a recap episode full of new reflection and stupid games. If you want to follow along with us, our updated reading calendar with our schedule for Harrow the Ninth is available on our website at frontlinefifth.podbean.com, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, which are linked in the show notes. If you enjoyed this podcast, please tell your friends and give us a 5-star rating anywhere you can. And of course, if you didn't enjoy the podcast, feel free to lie. We have a Patreon, which you can join for access to bonus content every month, and you can become a patron. Don't worry, it's not like becoming a cavalier at patreon.com/frontlinefifth. And finally, if you have any fun theories or you want to, send us that DM showing that you recommended us, you can feel free to email us at frontlinefifth@gmail.com. And with that, I'll remind you not to unlock any tombs or enter any doors without permission because, geists. Bye!
Bye! Frontline Fifth is a Locked Tomb podcast conceived by Marietta Mako and starring Marietta Mako, Hannah Grunwald, Brooke Anderson, and John Ryan. Our cover art was designed and created by Marietta Mako, who also edited this episode. Our fabulous music was composed and recorded by Blake Anderson. The Locked Tomb series is a completely dope-ass book series by Tamsin Muir, who does not know we exist and is in no way affiliated with this podcast.